Awesome. So we are here with Phil Illy, the stoic author, juggler, fashionista, one of the most talented jugglers in Portland of hula hoops. Now, I know you can juggle balls, probably clubs, definitely not poi because that's silly. You are consistently slaying. And the reason I've got you here is because you don't really seek attention. You know what I'm saying? You do it for you. And while you may have a really intense aesthetic to you, you do not actually seek attention actively. I would believe that is an example of being stoic. Is that how you see yourself?
Um, I think that stoicism is more about like how you manage dissatisfaction in life. But I mean, I get what you're saying in the sense that I'm quite overtly transvestic and very visible, but it's not like I'm intentionally trying to court attention from people.
Do you think it's a problem that a lot of people focus on getting attention as an artist instead of just doing their thing?
Instead of just arting. Yeah. I mean it's easy when you're doing art to get caught up in the peripheral related things instead of just the actual act of doing your art and getting better at it and enjoying it.
Yeah, isn't that funny? It's like the reason we started is for some self therapy. And then after, I think for most people, it's after like a year, they start posting or doing it for attention, and then it robs them of their momentum.
It can, yeah. If I remember, yeah, I was posting on Instagram for a while, trying to get a following like a while back, and it posting videos anytime you're spending posting is time you're not spending juggling.
Interesting. So you compartmentalize. I actually agree with that. Yesterday, I was trying to get a clip for about 20 minutes, never got it. And I was like, I should have just practiced.
Yeah, it's yeah. If you, I mean, if you're having trouble nailing the sequence or the tricks, then it may not be ready for filming.
I'm not having trouble with it when I'm not filming. It's that red light anxiety. But that's a
Oh,
personal thing.
really? You get worse when there's pressure on? Like I get better.
If it's just a camera, I get worse. If it's a crowd of people, oftentimes I get better.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. With a crowd, I definitely get better, but yeah, maybe it's not the same with a camera.
Well, let's dig deeper. I have 5 questions for you. Just in order, they are related to your practice routine, your development as a public figure, your book, music, and your general demeanor. You know, of stoicism is the word I'm using, but we can maybe come up with a better word. So let's start with that first question: practice routine. How do you warm up that many muscle groups? Because you do handstands, high tosses, juggling. You use your wrists, shoulders, forearms, abs. You use every muscle group. How do you get warmed up for all that?
I used to warm up when I put more effort into juggling. Now it's not my central thing. It's something I do on the side to like as part of my balanced lifestyle. Um, but I would say warming up for me is just I juggle to warm up because then there's things like hand balancing or doing some straps conditioning that if you're not warmed up you can hurt yourself. So I basically when I'm working out I warm up just by juggling because it's a low strength activity, and then I then do strength training after I've warmed up by juggling.
I warm up by juggling for like one song maybe, and then I go do pull-ups, some push-ups, usually like some abs. But I don't do any straps. Can you tell me more about the straps you do?
Um, I just have these short little travel straps that are just it's just basically aerial straps where there's it's as the name indicates, it's a strap and it wraps around your wrist, and then you do move gymnastic movements from that, where you actuate from the shoulder joint and you try to just basically have the most strong shoulders ever and do a bunch of movements with your arms completely straight so that the force is isolated at the shoulder. And it's yeah, the aerial conditioning is very good to have as a balance to handstands because handstands is pushing and aerial is pulling.
Oh man. Okay, so let's get into that a little bit. So you said actuating from the shoulder. For me, that would be just holding weights up and just going to the side, like this kind of stuff. Are you talking about
Those are
holding?
bent arm.
Oh yeah, I just don't have room to fit my arm in. So usually,
R-
something like this.
Right, right, yeah, yeah.
So do you place shoulder strength as your number one priority to maintain health for all these circus arts that you do?
The shoulders are the foundation of the circus arts I do, and I would say most circus artists, the shoulder is their most important joint as well. I mean, granted, they're all important in the sense that if one is broken, you kind of can't be a performer. But I think shoulders are especially important because they're the base of the arm, and it's the wrist and hands which do all the fine motor stuff. And then you got to have the shoulder. Basically, you need the shoulder very jacked so that you don't hurt yourself while doing circus.
Yeah, let's talk about that. My follow-up question to that is what mistakes do a lot of artists make in their warm-ups or lack of warm-ups?
I think the lack of warm ups is a mistake. I mean, I'm currently doing it. The lack of warm ups in general, just because I haven't been devoting as much time to circus. But it's warming up is important, and when you're younger, it doesn't feel that way because you just don't. It's hard to notice how much it matters until you get older and your body recovers slower and hurts easier and such.
Yep. The slow recovery is what's frustrating because I'll be like, okay, I pulled a muscle, give me a day, and I'll be juggling with no pain again. Now it's like, give me a week, which is enough time for me to like mentally lose my momentum. So there's this odd pressure on warm up and proper form that wasn't there in my 20s.
Yeah, I would agree that I also put more attention towards not hurting myself now and making sure recovery is done properly.
Have you had any major injuries?
I don't know. I crashed on my scooter like 6 or 7 years ago, and then my left arm couldn't really do handstands for a bit because the wrist and shoulder got hurt. Um, yeah, I haven't had any like super catastrophic injuries so far, but I've definitely had like little micro injuries where it has to this day it impacts my handstands and my flexibility, and I can tell that that damage was done.
Maybe like a ligament tear or a tendon tear or maybe like a bone spur or something?
No, nothing those that intense. Um, I don't know what was broken because it's not like I had healthcare at the time. So
Even if you do, oh my, yeah, don't get me started. Sheesh. OHP is pretty good. If like Oregon has a decent health plan, it's actually just as good as my one that I had through a corporate job.
it's
Where
probably better.
yeah, the deductible is $3,000, and these like Zoom Care will charge you up to $500 for a referral fee. So it's like healthcare is very predatory because they don't tell you until after the fact. So you go in for something that should take 5 minutes, and it takes 5 visits of them referring you to other specialists. They all just get paid through this cyclone of not telling you upfront how much you're going to charge. So twice I've walked out of there and I should owe a Zoom Care $1,000, and I said, no, I'm not paying you. You didn't tell me. And they really tried to strong arm me. It was a big, tall female doctor, bigger than me, physically imposing, holding her clipboard and gesturing aggressively. But I was like, no, you're not going to win this one. This is not how healthcare should be. And I actually wound up walking out of there without a bill one time. I was like, wow. But the fact that I didn't have to pay anything for them doing nothing, I shouldn't be proud of that, but I am. So yeah, when it comes to health, like you have to be proactive nowadays because despite us having incredible medical technology, it's really only for people who make 6 figures. You cannot afford primary care in America without paying an arm and a leg, is what I'm finding.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and because that's the case, I found that there's workarounds like Dr. Google. Dr. Google's always got the hookup, and now that ChatGPT is out, you can like often you can figure out diagnoses by talking about it with ChatGPT. And in terms of like getting fixed, like improvements, you can generally find drugs on the black market, and yeah, there's yeah. I remember a long time ago. There's one time where um, I had strep throat, and so I was like, I didn't have the money to go to a doctor, so I bought fish antibiotics and took that, and it worked.
Oh, wow, that's unbelievable. Fish antibiotics?
Yeah, it's unfortunately more common than you'd think for Americans to do that. But yeah, you buy the fish antibiotics and then you weigh them out on a scale, and then yeah, it works.
Yeah, just
Same
start.
drug.
You can start breathing underwater too. I heard after that, right?
Uh, you might have to try that. I'm not gonna.
All right. So it sounds like your practice routine and your view of healthcare overall is pretty proactive for yourself. That's how you got to be where you are. But it also sounds like juggling and flow arts is second to, it's part of a balanced lifestyle, part of a balanced breakfast, like you said, right? So let's
Yeah.
shift to a little bit zooming out. How has living in Portland shaped you as a public figure?
Um. Well, I don't know that I'm not quite yet a public figure. Maybe I'm quite visible in Portland. That like yeah, there's thousands of people where if they described me, they'd be like to someone that people would be like, oh yeah, I've seen that person. But um yeah, Portland has shaped me in the way that it's a very good incubator for exploration being in Portland. Like if you go to someone like LA or Seattle or New York City, you're gonna have to just hustle 24/7 and like because you're just trying to get to the top. But Portland, because it's a little cheaper and the culture is more liberal here, you have you have more freedom to explore your art and just basically have a proper work-life balance.
I totally agree with that. That's how I feel. Especially if you save up a little bit of money, it can go a long way. Rent, if you live alone, I don't know how that would work, but if you rent or share a house with someone, it can become a little bit more affordable. That's something I struggled with is when I made really good money. I was like, oh, I can afford to live alone now. Bad decision. So that I went through 1 year of paying, a high rent to live alone and realized, oh my gosh, I'd rather just put in the time to find good roommates who believe in me artistically and are okay to have a living environment where I explore those arts, but also work. So yeah, we could talk more about that. Okay, how is the flow arts community open minded?
Um, I mean, it's open-minded in the sense that they I mean, it's an artist community. I wouldn't expect it to not be open-minded. It's just people doing their art and a lot of them are a little weird. So it's good.
Yeah, if you come in with some idiosyncrasies or maybe some weird body language or fashion or mannerisms, you're not going to be judged for it. You will be judged if you're a creep or if you're consistently, breaking social boundaries, but just visuals and mannerisms, they don't really get in the way of participating in the art. I guess I would say the Portland Flow Arts community is open minded because you can always expect people who welcome you to the jams and people in the front of the crowd to smile at you and interact with you in a very mild way, albeit. But unlike sports communities where there's a lot of tension, if you're on the other team or something like that, it seems like everyone's on the same team in the flow arts community. There is subtle competition, but there's usually not outright competition.
Yeah, and I've noticed there's a cultural norm in the flow community of trying not to be too competitive because it's about focusing on just reaching the flow state for yourself and just enjoying it for yourself rather than trying to be the best. And granted, like you mentioned, people do, after like a year or two, often get like the drive to start being a performer because they want to be on stage and such.
Seeking validation. Yep, just like we all do.
Yeah, and it's understandable. Um, and it is nice. It is nice to perform. Um, but it's I find that it's a pleasant thing to do and I like the social benefits. But I mean, the money's not good and um in terms of higher purpose stuff, it's hard to for me, it's not as important as some of the other stuff I'm working on.
Yeah, so it's not very competitive in the world of flow arts, and it's almost like you win automatically by just signing up and showing up. Not to name any community specifically, but let's think of some other more closed-minded communities. You can bring it up if you'd like. How are other communities more closed-minded?
Um, I don't like I think you'd have to be a little more specific. There's a lot.
Well, there's a community that you would think would be wide open to your ideas. I'm switching towards your slowly.
Oh, you're talking about
slowly
the
towards
gender stuff?
Yep. So tell me about the
Yeah.
closed-minded people you've run into in a community that you would think would be open-minded.
Right. So like yeah. So like I wrote a book about the most common kind of transgenderism, and the scientific explanation is that it's caused by a sexual orientation that makes you attracted to being the other sex. And so I've found that the trans community, you'd think they'd be open-minded, um, because their history of being marginalized and mistreated and outcast and all that, and being portrayed as weirdos. But they and that community will let you have dozens of different gender identities. There's so many different gender identities you could claim. There's like non-binary, genderqueer, and then there's like gender flux, and there's gender. There's so many different gender identities people can take. But I've noticed that if you identify as like autogynephilic or as a transvestite, then suddenly you've crossed the line. You're not allowed to identify as those things, because of political concerns that the trans movement has. And so, yeah, there's like a selective open-mindedness among trans people, I would say.
Yeah, you said selective. That reminds me of Chris Rock's like selective outrage, and he seems to be in a weird gray area politically where he's calling people out on. Of course, he is more of a Democrat. You can tell obviously he's for Black Lives Matter and things like that. But he also does like to call out people on his own side, and it seems like you're in a similar position. Do you feel like specifically being a transvestite is bad because it's not holistic enough? Bad according to other people who may be threatened by it.
I think that term transvestite comes from the sexology literature, and it portrays, rightfully so, it portrays the cross-gender inclination among my kind as like ultimately sexual in origin, even though it's much bigger of a mental phenomenon than simply eroticism. But
of course,
yeah, the trans community doesn't like it being talked about in a way that implies it's ultimately sexual in origin. And so they don't like transvestite. They don't like the concept of autogynephilia, which is love of self as woman. And yeah, they just don't want the sexual origins pointed out.
that's interesting because a lot of people could learn from that, and so by shooting you down, like you're living in the gray area where they're making it very black and white, ironically, or I shouldn't say black and white, they're very like binary, where they're like you have to be holistically committed and take hormones and have surgeries. And it sounds like you're saying, well, you can live a great life as an autogynephilic transvestite, as opposed to their model, which seems like you have to be sad until you've fully transitioned, which is a years long process. Am I reading that correctly?
I think you kind of got the gist of the situation right there. That the main part of the trans movement, it's run by transsexuals, and they portray being trans as necessarily involving medical interventions. And I think this artificially gives people tunnel vision instead of realizing that there's a lot of different ways they could try to integrate their male and female selves into one whole self without necessarily doing gender transition. Like, I'm not against transition, but I don't think it's for everyone. It's really not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's introduces a lot of new variables to people who are already pretty fragile and pretty scared of going out into public. So, I mean, this may sound so silly, but like, I'll wear some skinny jeans. To me, that's embracing a feminine trait. And so obviously it's not transvestite, I'm not functioning as a transvestite, but like I'm fine with the gray area of showing some feminine traits. I believe that
You don't do
acknowledge.
that just because you think women thinks it looks good.
I think it helps me get away from what I used to wear, which was like really baggy pants, baggy jeans, and stuff like that. I wasn't wearing any Jinko jeans, or anything like that. But I certainly think that as an artist, it helps to just give the very immediate vibe that you're kind of more living in multiple gray areas. I'm not saying I am bisexual or anything, but I do think acknowledging feminine sides to body movement or mannerisms can make people feel at ease in the arts community.
Oh, right, yeah. Like you're talking about not wanting to appear too masculine because like right now there's sort of like a anti-masculinity or anti-men sort of vibe politically,
I,
and
I assume that's why I'm doing it. I never know why I'm doing anything that I do. I claim
I
to.
mean you're probably just doing it to impress women, is my guess.
You would most likely be correct, but I don't know for sure. I like to accredit myself with having loftier goals than just that, but that's probably at the core of it.
Yeah,
So
it is.
okay, this is a flow arts podcast, right? Do you think about your book while flowing? Like if you're spinning 2, 3, 4, 5 hoop, do you like to think about the topics of your book while you're flowing? The reason I ask is because I listen to my own drafts of my songs while I'm juggling, and like the body movement while I'm listening to it helps me feel like doubly productive. And sometimes I'm like working on memorizing my songs while I'm running or biking or spinning. Do you feel like while you're spinning is a good time to meditate and reflect on your book?
Um, I find that a lot of times when I'm spinning, I don't want to be. I'm trying to take time off of thinking, but I still end up thinking. And so I do think about stuff related to the book and the subject.
Do you experience breakthroughs with the subject matter of the book, like while you also experience breakthroughs with the juggling patterns? Because I noticed that when I'm listening to my own music, if it's like a new song I'm working on, the fact that it's new and I'm trying to memorize, it's all hip hop lyrics, complex rhyme schemes.
Right.
Like I'm also learning new patterns at the same time. I like to think that they correlate. Like if I learn one new thing, I can learn another new thing. Do you feel like you have really good clarity about your book while you're moving your body, sort of distracting your body so your mind can think clearly?
Um, I would say that it's not necessarily clarity, but it's more of the explorative shower thoughts sort of train of thinking where your mind is in a place where it can think new thoughts just incidentally, like they will happen as a byproduct of what you're doing.
Okay, so does your writing career affect your flow regimen? You said you've sort of shifted your focus from flow and juggling to promoting and writing and editing the book. Do you kind of feel like flow gets in the way ever?
Um, if I was still devoting as much attention to it as I used to, the flow, that it would be getting in the way of my sexology work, but I prioritize my sexology work now, and flow is a secondary thing that I use to as part of my physical wellness and mental wellness practices.
I think a lot of people would in the flow arts community would like really benefit from hearing that. Can you repeat that with like 2 or 3 more sentences of elaboration on that?
Oh, just that uh, doing the flow arts is a good adjunct to a well-lived life, but if it is the central focus, it may not be best to have it as a central focus. I mean, first of all, it's not productive in the sense that when you throw a prop up, it always comes back down. Like there's nothing built at the end. Like the movement itself is beautiful, but it doesn't leave a lasting artifact or a physical change in the world. So I think it's cool to have it as like a part of enjoying life, but to not necessarily try to make it a hustle.
anti-hustle culture is really interesting because you talk to someone from New York or LA and they're all, I'm always on, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we live in Portland, so that's not the vibe that people go for here. Like
Right.
we're trying to like maybe like smoke some weed and see some nature and hang out with the homies. We're not trying to like take speed every day and grind 12 hours at our like banking jobs, you know.
So it's funny you say that because like this podcast, I want to become bigger, but I never really want it to be my full-time thing. Same with my performances, same with my new patterns that I'm unlocking, same with tutorials. I love to do them on my days off. They use technology, they utilize music, they provide value to other people. But I've always known the main way I should spend my time is like corporate sales or being a teacher, two jobs that I've enjoyed and made more of an impact from. However, there is always this thought in the back of my mind is because people ask it is if you could do flow arts full time, would you? So what if somebody offered you 40 grand a year to be a full time hoop and handstand instructor at like a circus school, say Jaja or something like that? Would you take it?
I mean, me 5 years ago would have tried that. Um, but currently I would not because I think my sexology work is more important because there's a bunch of people that are suffering from gender dysphoria and no one's just telling them why, like what causes it. They're not being told, here's your situation you're in, so I think that's more important right now for me to put my energy into.
So my second question under this third topic, which is the book while flowing, does your flow regimen seem silly compared to your book? Just playing catch with yourself as opposed
Yeah,
to helping people in pain.
right. Yeah, it seems frivolous, and it's not. I mean, I still do it. It's. I think it's good to have a balanced life where we do different things. Um, but it it doesn't feel important in the way that my sexology work feels important.
That is absolutely amazing because so many people say that flow is everything to them and they work a job they maybe dislike or they can't reach a flow state in it and they don't have any beauty in their life outside of it. They're not on their purpose in a corporate or educational or whatever type of sense you could say that's elevated. Let me just dig into this a little bit. So frivolous is a negative connotation, but you said it very confidently. I feel the same way, right? I'm grinding the same pattern every day at the gym, and I'm like, I would probably get further in my career and in romance and in body chemistry if I actually was lifting weights and running again and cycling and swimming and doing yoga. But instead, I'm just hung up on this one pattern, and I'm like, it's frivolous, but I have this sunk cost fallacy where I'm like, I have to unlock it. I have to post myself doing this with Fire Poi within 2023, or it was all for nothing. And so some patterns are so difficult for me where I get sucked into them and I should be doing other things. And I know I should be doing other things, but it's almost addictive combined with sunk cost fallacy. I really like the mental challenge of it. I don't feel mentally challenged in many other jobs that I've had. So I'm like, I just inject that mental challenge into my day. Do you think there's some people who don't have a life's purpose and never will? And so flow is their only way to have that like zone of proximal development where they're growing and challenged in flow state and beautiful. And if so, what would you say to somebody who that's all they have?
And that's fine if it's all that someone has. Not everyone is born with the ability to have to make like an impact on a large impact on society. Like most people I think have the ability to contribute in the sense of, like you mentioned, being a teacher, that's contributing. But I guess it's a matter of scale with contribution where I just think there's a small minority of people that are naturally endowed with a higher capacity for intellectual ability, that have a disproportionate chance of making a really big impact. And I think those people that do have a kind of a duty to use their natural ability to try to help others. And
I would say, in
yeah,
addition to that natural ability, which I totally agree with, I would say, in addition to that, is like some type of pain that they felt combined with social grace that doesn't have a chance to shine. So they take that pain, condense it into some sort of, diamonds are made under pressure, or they repackage that pain that they felt in such a way that it's going to benefit other people who don't have their confidence, muscle tone, height, mannerisms. It's like they want to help other people who are in similar pain. Do you feel like that's a trait of a lot of high achievers? Is that they had a really painful situation?
um, I mean, I think sometimes high achievers can be too hard on themselves and basically feel like if they're not suffering, then they're not being productive and they don't have worth. Um, but I just think there's some people that naturally have a higher capacity for talent, and um, yeah, it's okay for someone to just have the flow arts be the thing they like to do. I don't think everyone has to make like to work really hard to make a big contribution to society. That there's a lot of regular everyday jobs and roles that need to be filled, and basically that even though we're all like the main character in our individual lives, so to speak, you know, um, if I don't think everyone should necessarily have main character syndrome where they feel like they have to be a hero.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, because it's very common to see movies where there's an obvious main character, so maybe we all think we are that. There was this advice podcast it always said, we're the star of our own movie, and I found that really resonates with me. So I'm cool being a side character to other people's business too. Like, I am confident in that, and I know I'm going to live a long life. So being three different side characters throughout my career or life kind of feels fine. Not as much pressure, and I can have fun with the people in my inner circle. There is always going to be that innate desire to achieve more than side character status. But I think if you're doing something for the clout, it robs it of its like true fuel. It becomes fueled with this like weird alternative source. And I can't put my finger on exactly why, but when you do things to try to elevate your status, and that's it, it never seems as genuine.
Yeah, that's because it's not your the status should be a byproduct of doing something important, something that contributes. But if you just directly try to seek status, I mean, you could. It does work in the sense that when people do get massive online followings through doing frivolous stuff, they do amass a sort of power and the ability to make influence and change. But I there's definitely something different besides like trying to seek status and doing things that lead to you gaining prestige and status are different things.
So how do you feel about people buying followers or buying a blue check mark on Instagram or Twitter? What do you think that indicates, and is it worth it?
Well, I bought a blue check on Twitter because I like blue, first of all, and it it makes I'm trying to spread a message, and it's worth paying a little to make the algorithms spread your message better. If your message is important, then $8 a month, I consider it a small price for the benefit it gives me in terms of algorithmic outreach. Um, yeah,
Okay, so I see the blue check is a little bit different from buying followers, but it's kind of like a pay to play system. Attention ain't free, so every little thing you can do to maximize, it's kind of like an investment that will pay for itself if you do a good job with the rest of the content.
yeah, and like I know what you're talking about with like the gaining followers thing. I like 5 or 6 years ago, I did a bit of botting, you know, to get followers. But my reasoning was my hoop tricks are really advanced. I don't want to spend a bunch of time posting videos for like a few dozen people to see. Like,
Right.
I've already put a lot of time into the art itself, so I want to sort of automate this sort of side activity of like trying to get attention.
Automate, delegate, eliminate. That's what I learned from The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, that's a good book.
All right, well, let's transition. We were talking about, the flow arts community, and a large part of that is music. Your taste in music is like tropical house, which is something I really like when I'm traveling. What kind of music would be preferable to the classic like bass music we hear so often? And like, why do you think it would be beneficial to change the genre at flow jams more often?
I mean, maybe I'm
Lack
just
of
sensitive to
awareness.
noise, but like often the
I am
music's
too.
just too loud. And, I can handle loud music for a half hour, an hour, but, if I want to stay someplace for multiple hours straight, it can't be overwhelming like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That I sold hearing protection for several years, and the test is like, about 100 decibels for, I want to say like 30 minutes causes hearing loss. And it's like we're pushing like way above that for way longer than that. And a lot of people will stand right by the speakers because they want to feel that bass. You can hear music fine with earplugs in. That would be one change I would like to see, is more people would just wear earplugs to protect themselves or not stand so dang close to the speakers.
Or turn down the speakers so that no one has to change their behavior like that.
Yeah, I never got the super loud music. I feel like in the flow arts community, it's not as bad as like in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, in the rave scene. It was like screamingly loud all through college. I was going to those shows, and eventually I was like, I can't do this ringing ears every night. Okay, so here's a specific question. Do you find that your attention is negatively affected by music? Like you can't enter a flow state, you can't level up your juggling, you can't put on a good show, your body language is off. Like, how does it affect you if it's bad?
Yeah, I'll like not want to flow if it's too bad. We're talking about music being bad right now, but like I want to say most of the time it's not so bad that I can't enjoy myself.
I feel like a tenth of the time on an average night that they play tracks from, like, that was just a miss. Like, I can't get down to this.
Right. There's times where yeah, it makes it where I don't even want to juggle or flow, don't want to be sober, like, or don't want to even be there. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
Overall, like the music, I think is just supposed to be an adjunct to help you focus or flow, and I don't really see it as the central thing.
I agree. Yeah, it's in the background. It becomes the central thing when it's bad, but when it's good, it like
Yeah,
isn't so important. It's like good coffee, right? You're drinking it and you're like, it doesn't have that much taste, but it's good. And if it's bad coffee, you're like, it has a lot of taste and it's bad. Okay, so far we touched on like the practice routine, living in Portland, your book a little bit, and then the music in our community. My last topic I wanted to look into is like the reason I like to pick your brain is your overall demeanor. Do you have like, I always come ask you questions. I'm just like, I have to ask this person questions. My note is I always want to pick your brain. Do you have a lot of people approach you asking open-ended questions about your outfit, your skills, and your like stoicism?
um, I don't. They're not usually as curious as you, no. But I mean, I do have people come up and talk to me about my hooping, um, because it is particularly it's technically quite advanced at this point. I'm not trying to say that to brag. I'm just trying to like neutrally describe it. It's like it's
Oh yeah, you're not bragging. That's putting it mildly.
yeah, it's I have technical proficiency at it, and um, yeah, people ask me questions about my outfits sometimes. Usually, I just think they're like being nice because they're like just trying to show inclusivity to the gender weirdos, and like that's fine. That's nice. It's much better than them being mean, so I'm down with it.
Okay, so you don't actively go talk to people, but sometimes people come up to you and ask questions. I I like how you are skilled and look different, and obviously tall and muscular, and like not like kind of like silly every once in a while, but in a very unique way.
But yeah, I would say absurd would be Like,
No, I don't think
yeah,
absurd. I think more like sometimes I use the word specific. You think you're absurd?
no, just like aesthetically, it can be kind of absurd. Like
Yeah,
to be like a 6'4" muscular transvestite is kind of absurd.
especially with the talent stack, and the like when you pull up on a scooter or an electric unicycle with like what do you have, like 12 hoops,
They usually carry 8 at a time. Yeah.
eight hoops, and especially all the LEDs, and you're just so stoic and serious. I'm just like this visual. This is gonna be awesome. Every time you pull up, I've always thought that to myself. Like if someone is this serious in such a absurd context, like I assume there's gonna be a talent stack here. Just the 8 hoops alone is exciting to me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get that my aesthetic could seem absurd, but I think that's just a reflection of how absurd that it is to live in technological society to begin with. It's very weird.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, for example, having conversations with people who have like crazy amounts of like piercing their tattoos or hairstyles or fashion, um, maybe sometimes while they're like doing drugs in front of you or just doing something ridiculous. Like the seriousness of the conversation, I'm like, can we just acknowledge how goofy of a world we live in right now? Or like maybe I'm just a normie muggle situation, but I love to call out like, wow, that's a wild outfit. And
I feel
sometimes,
like you're like an undercover normie where like you can blend it. You look normie with your aesthetic in a lot of ways, but you're obviously not a normie psychologically.
who knows? I don't even.
Well, I mean, you do a bunch of different types of arts and you enjoy being around artists
Love it.
and yeah, so yeah, I think psychologically you're like less of a normie on the inside than you look on the outside.
I'm a normio or whatever.
Like an
No,
Oreo.
yeah, I'll come
Yeah.
up with it. Okay, so my last question is: how do you like to engage with curious questioners? Like, what do you? How do you give people more than an absurd interaction? Like, how do you leave them with, follow me on this, read my book, or here's a drill for you? How do you like to give people nuggets of your experience when they come up and pick your brain a little bit?
I mean, it really depends on the situation. Like if they're asking if they're like a hooper that wants to know a hoop trick, I'll tell them how to do it. If like the other day, yesterday or so at the gym, there was a girl doing headstands and stuff, and I started doing handstands, and then we talked, and I like tried to explain some stuff to her. Um, I like to help people, but if I know stuff about technique that can help people do what they want better, I like to share that technique with them so that they can do their art better.
Yeah, no like sob story or I need you to buy my book. It's just like very specific to the skills you're into. And that's a really good sign of maturity and confidence, I think, is to stay focused on what other people actually need.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to stay focused on. Like, I don't often know what everyone else needs, and like, part of me sometimes I can just talk about stuff I'm interested in for too long because I have a tendency to do that. Um, yeah, but like, when it comes to the gender stuff, I'll tell people about my book, which I guess I should name. My book's Auto Heterosexual, Attracted to Being the Other Sex. It's about basically when heterosexuality gets pointed at yourself and it makes you want to be the other sex to the greatest extent possible, and the inability to accomplish this can bring sadness, much in the same way that in conventional relationships people can feel sad if they like want a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever and they can't find one. So yeah, but yeah, I wrote a book about the most common kind of transgenderism in both sexes, and it's coming out June 13th. And anyone that wants to get the heads up on when it's coming out can sign up at autohetbook.com. And yeah, that's the gender stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's cool that you have used flow to gain, I don't want to say clout, to gain a valuable position in the flow arts community where people come to you for advice, but you also have another outlet, which is a place where you have no clout. Maybe you do online, but
No, I don't have clout yet. I'm building it,
yeah,
but and it'll be way. I expect it'll be way bigger than my flow clout. I mean, but the flow scene's positive and nice and enjoyable, and I like it. But with the gender stuff, I'm entering a war zone, and it's going to be brutal.
it's almost like you wanted to start over because five hoop is like top tier, and you kind of wanted a new challenge. Would you say that's part of it?
Well, I mean, I'm working towards 7 hoop, but
That's
like
ridiculous. We need taller ceilings for you.
I need stronger shoulders or a more talented left arm. Rather, my right arm's fine. Um, yeah, no, I did kind of reach a level with hooping where I put a lot of points into that skill tree, so to speak, and it it's hard to advance much beyond there, or rather, if I do get good at hooping, there's an opportunity cost where I'm not getting good at other things that maybe can contribute more.
Mm. Yeah, very well put. That is the first thing that comes to mind every time I step into the racquetball room, or whatever dojo I'm in to practice Seb's mess with Poi, where I'm like, I really should be running or like doing yoga again for healing purposes instead of just jacking up my shoulder more. But this sunk cost fallacy keeps kicking in. I think it's going to be really interesting when your book pops off, or maybe it's your second book, maybe it's an interview you do, and then you also, because they not job interviews and with bosses that I've had, at the end of the interview, I'll be like, oh, I'm also like a performing like juggler, kind of amateur on the side, and they're so interested in it. So I think it'll be interesting for you to be like, oh, I'm an amateur juggler, and then they see a clip or you demonstrate, and it's like, that is amazing juggling. So I think it's cool you've got this background, mind-blowing skill as an author. I feel like most authors are, Edgar Allan Poe, where there's some dude in his living room sipping wine every night into oblivion, and then that's all they do is write. You've got a very well-rounded talent stack. So I'm excited to see the looks on people's faces when they realize the author is more than just a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna help that I have a hoop demo from like 5 or 6 years ago up on YouTube. And like yeah, your listeners can look at it if you go on YouTube. For my name's Phil Illy, last name Illy, and yeah, if you just look for my demo on there, there's a hoop demo from like 5 or 6 years ago, and it's my girlfriend at the time did the filming and editing, and she made it silly. It's like half twerking in shiny pants. It's like just her trying to get as many silly handstand twerks in as possible. It's pretty funny.
Well, we can always film more because I see you usually once or twice, maybe 3 times a month. So if you ever need more content, I'm here to help with that.
Yeah, thanks, Troy.
Hey. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. Not really, but for today's time frame, it does. There's so many more questions I'd like to ask about the war zone you're entering, how you got to where you are with five hoop, but I think the listeners have enough information to check you out for yourself. Auto Het Book. What was it?
Yeah, autoheadbook.com.
Autohetbook.com.
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm at Phil_Illy, and on Twitter, I'm at autogynephilic.
Awesome. So you've got two amazing strands of your life that are working together to reach who it needs to reach. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to picking all the visuals to go with this.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me, Troy.